Hey everybody, welcome to another social studies lesson. Last time we talked about the roaring 20s. Don't spend money you don't have. People were buying all kinds of things, whether they needed them or not, and a lot of them were spending money they didn't have. They were buying on credit. And in the 1930s, that came back to hurt them. So, because YouTube won't let me make a 15+ minute video, we're going to break this into two parts. Part number one today, we're going to talk about what an economy is. I can't talk. It's too late in the day. We're going to talk about the people who were buying things on credit that they didn't need. And we're going to talk about the banks, because the banks then were a little bit different than the banks today. Before we start, I hope you have had time to go to BrainPop Junior and watch the video on spending versus saving. Every one of my students, you can do that one. Some of you, if you're wanting to go a little bit deeper and you're able to, you can go on BrainPop. There are two videos about the Great Depression. One is on the causes and the other is on life during the Great Depression. They're good videos. So it's up to you if you want to take on that challenge and go look at those. I'm holding up my nickel because this is a lesson about the economy. And the economy is how a country uses its resources, including money. What is a country spending its money on? And is it spending money? I'm using my nickel because one of my kids stole my last dollar. So, good reminder. Hopefully you're not going through your mom's purse taking her money. All right. So, on a small scale, just to kind of help you wrap your mind around this, imagine a factory that makes cars, and more people want cars. They're buying cars. So you're making lots of money. You can't make cars fast enough, so you have to hire more people to put the cars together. And so you've got more cars to sell, and more people are buying those cars, and you're making more money, and you're getting to hire more people to make more cars. That's an example of a healthy economy. What we had in the 1930s was not a healthy economy. A lot of people, like I said, in the 1920s, they were buying things on credit. The banks back then are not like the banks now. They would take people's money in, just like we have accounts today, but every banker was independent. They didn't have any rules they had to go by. If someone came in the door and they needed a loan for a new car or a new house, it was up to the banker if he wanted to loan them that money or not. And a lot of times they made loans that were bad ideas. They didn't stop to check and see if this person who was asking for money had other loans already that he wasn't paying, or if he had a job so that he was able to pay back the loans, or if what he was buying this for was not worth what he was paying. They didn't stop and ask questions a lot of times. They just loaned money. And they would loan money to people to go invest in the stock market, which is kind of like gambling, legally. So when the stock market crashed in October of 1929 and people lost all that money, they couldn't pay back the loans that they had taken out in order to invest in the stock market. People lost their jobs. There were too many products and not enough people buying them. There were too many cars and things and people weren't buying them. So people got laid off. And the more people who got laid off, the less they spent, the less was bought. The companies suffered. They had to lay off more people. The more people were laid off, the less they spent. It was a vicious cycle. So the banks, they didn't help this situation at all. In October of 1929, when the stock market crashed, there was a run on the banks. Literally, people ran to the banks to get their money out, to make sure they had all their cash there. And the problem was that the banks had loaned out some of their money and hadn't gotten it back. So everyone lined up to get their money out, and pretty soon the banks ran out of money. And because they were independent businesses, they had to close their doors, just like a store that goes out of business or a factory that goes out of business. Couldn't pay their bills, so they couldn't pay their people back. They went out of business. And the people who were at the end of the line, after they ran out of money, they just didn't get their money back. They lost all their money in the bank. Not really fair. So the banks did not help here. Another thing that didn't help was one of our presidents, Hoover. He came into office saying he was going to end this Great Depression. Well, his idea of ending it was raising taxes. And think about it. If you tax $0, you have $0. If you say we're going to pass a tax on every car that's sold so that there's an extra $20 tax, well, if you sell 0 cars, you still have $0. It didn't work. It wasn't until President Roosevelt was elected that he came in with this New Deal. And we're going to talk about some of this stuff in the next video, but here's a few things related to the banks specifically and why we don't necessarily have to worry about another Great Depression. The first thing that he did, one of his things, he insured the banks. He said, okay, banks, everybody who's still open, here's the deal. You have to follow these rules when you're loaning out money. You have to check the background. You need to do this paperwork. As long as you're following the rules, your money is insured. That means if everybody runs to the bank to get their money and you've got a bunch loaned out and you don't have enough cash to give to people, the government will send that bank more money so they can pay the people they owe. If money gets stolen from the bank, the government will send money to replace it. So when you hear about a bank being robbed, don't worry, it's not your money they took, it's the government's money. So there's a commission, the FDIC is what it's called. If you don't go to the bank today, when the bank's open again, either on the front door or on the drive-through, you'll see a sticker that says, it has the letters FDIC. That means we are a bank that follows the government's rules and your money is safe. If something happens to your money in this bank, the government will pay you back. Up until that time, there was no one regulating or making the rules for who could get loans and who couldn't, and backing it by saying, if your money gets stolen or is gone, we will give you more. That didn't happen at the beginning of the Great Depression. It's one of the things that made people more comfortable putting their money back into banks at the end of the Great Depression. Another thing was the stock market. It just kept dropping and dropping and dropping. Well, several years back, they made a rule that says if the stock market goes down so much in a single day, they actually shut the doors and say nobody else can trade money today. And that gives people time to calm down, take a deep breath, and come back the next day with a clear understanding of what's going on and a plan. That way, we won't have another major stock market crash like they had in 1929. We could still lose a lot of money in a single day, but it won't be that sudden one-day drop that they had in 1929. It won't be nearly as rough. Okay, so we talked about what the economy is. We talked about how the banks are different and why it's safer to put our money in banks today, and why it's still safer to take what we're saving, some of what we're saving, and putting in the stock market, because you can only lose so much. So we're going to cut this one off here. And we're going to pick up in the next video, part 2, with the Dust Bowl. Remember, save money, spend on what you need, and if you can help it, don't go into debt.